Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I apologize for the long patience of the story Eternally Mine. I had switched laptops and completely lost all of that, so I had to go and figure out where I had put the rough draft, and so that was why the story had put on a pause for a while. So thank you so much for still being patient with me. I have found it and we are back on. So today here is part 3 of Eternally Mine.
Nothing ever felt as good or as easy as when we were young. Though I felt misunderstood, it was a pleasure running away with you. We were just children, acting like a doll, crazy, naive, bold and carefree.
I couldn't breathe as I woke up on a bed of white lilies surrounded by thick fog and a scent of vanilla. I was on my belly, not a position I was used to, and I sat up, feeling afraid as I rushed through the curtains hanging down. I made my way through the thickened forest and entered the same river I'd stopped before during the walk home from the wedding. Why was I back here? Mai Thao. I turned around, and I saw Bua walking toward me, his handsome face filled with the same expression I saw every single day. I rushed over to him, but a thin curtain fell around me suddenly, and when I reached out to him, the energy snapped at my fingers, creating a small spark. It tingled, and I pulled my hand back immediately. "What's going on?" I asked. "I don't know," he whispered. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." The wind began to pick up, and as it blew across my face, something whipped into the lower lash line, and I shut my eyes, my vision blurring. Tears filled my eyes, and I gasped lightly as I tried to shield the wind. When I fought against it and slightly opened my eyes again and my vision steadied, I noticed that Bua's hair was longer than how he normally wore it. His hands were slightly off color, and his shoulders weren't as broad. He looked different than how I remembered him. "Bua," I called out. He didn't answer me as he tried to fight the curtain. "Bua!" He stopped moving about, and then his dark eyes focused on me as he lowered his hands. "Why do you keep calling me Bua?" he asked. A shiver ran down my spine. "Aren't you, Bua?" Shaking his head slowly, an eerie grin appeared on his face as he ripped the curtain from me, and a growl echoed from his lips. A laughter erupted from his throat, and I stepped away, fear escalating through my body. I watched as the face before me shimmered when it hit the lights, and small scales began to form like bubbles across his flesh. And then he turned toward me with sparkly eyes, and a forked tongue slithered out of his lips. "You should really consider how much of a better man I am," I thought. "To be honest, your husband doesn't hold a candle to me at all. Compared to me, he's a weakling." "Leave me alone! Why do you keep coming to me? I don't want you!" I cried. And then I looked up at the sky, and I screamed out my husband's name. The sky darkened, and it thundered across the universe as rain began to pour down in sheets. He laughed and raised his hands in the air.
Come at me! Come at me, human! Come and try to take back your bride when I've already captured her soul,"
he cried. I began to shake and screamed as loud, ringing sounds burst through my ears. A whirlwind began forming in the sky like that of a tornado, and the dark glow exploded the sky, splitting it in half, and out emerged Bua, dressed in black with a red veil over his head on an amber horse with wings. He shouted out 2 ancient verses as he came through, and the horse transformed into 1,000 warriors, falling to the earth, a sword on their back as lightning flashed across the sky and brought down a copper sword right into Bua's hand.
"Wow! What an entrance! Do you think that scares me?"
he asked as Bua came forward. The warriors he brought down circled around me and brought up their swords. They were all dressed in white, their swords shining like beacons of light, and they had long hair to their waists. They were so angelic looking as they created a protection spell around me. I'm here to bring my bride back. What makes you think you can keep her when she's not yours to begin with? Boa asked. He laughed, his face crooked with small little holes that were splitting his flesh apart. He turned toward Boa and gave him a frown.
She doesn't love you. In fact, she loves no one but me. Her heart holds nothing but me, an ancient fantasy that has been forever embedded into her soul from the very beginning on your wedding day, right here.
He splashed the water with an oversized hand that was now swelling.
Look, right here was where we fell in love, where she asked me to be hers for eternity. Right here.
Boa smirked. You have wishful thinking, demon. But the truth is that you could never compare to the warmth of a love from a human. My heart beats in my chest, while yours hold nothing but blackness. Return to your world and leave her alone. I've come to bring her soul home with me.
Oh, you and this army of yours? And you think I'll just let you walk out of here so gallantly like the hero you claim to be?
He roared, and the wings stretched his back apart as it emerged, flapping wildly and making the water's waves splash upon the shore.
You can dream, mortal. She belongs to me. Her soul is mine. Her body is mine. I have claimed her, and you are nothing.
Boa smiled. Oh, I'd hoped for nothing less. He planted his sword into the ground and took 2 fingers into his mouth, biting the flesh as crimson liquid began falling onto the copper sword. And he brought his hands together in a prayer, and a chant came through his moving lips. I watched as his body began to change. His dark clothes began shedding, and his hair grew longer. His facial features shifted slightly, and a light beamed from the very breath he breathed. He grew taller, and when he opened his eyes they were pure white. And when he picked up his sword, he swung, and a light slashed across the water, slicing it in half, and the power of it hit the demon straight in the face, splitting his lip apart, his tongue wagging as shock took over him. Then Boa reached behind him and brought out a bow and arrow, and fired 6 arrows at once, and he flipped in the air, kicking 3 to nail one of the demon dragon's wings against the rock, and then kicked another set of the other 3, pinning the opposite wing. He was now spread eagle against the terrain, lips split open and fear brimming in his eyes.
Who are you?
He cried.
How dare you come to destroy my kingdom?
Boa walked to stand before him and lowered his bow and arrow. I asked you to let my bride go. You didn't appreciate my gentleness, so I settled on using force. You don't recognize me, demon? He roared, his split lips spilling out green blood that bubbled.
Who are you?
Boa smiled and extended his hand. Who on earth can fire arrows like me? Think. His legs were becoming worn, and scales appeared as they began transforming into a tail.
Only one man I know of that can launch 6 shafts in a single movement.
Then say my name. The demon dragon's nostrils flared, and he screamed out,
Bochani Vang!
I watched as my husband's eyes stopped glowing, and he replaced the bow on his back. He took a red string from the hem of his sleeve and laid it between the waters of where he was and where Boa stood. If you ever step past this string, 3 pieces if you're long, 2 if you're short. Do I make myself clear? A growl was heard as if challenging Boa's order, and my husband took the copper sword and swung one of the horns growing out of his head, and he howled as dark liquid gushed down his face. Do I make myself clear?
Yes.
No one takes what is mine. If I have to chase her to the ends of the earth, I will, and I will find her, and I will take her home. If you ever see her coming your way, you will pretend your vision is poor. If you ever hear her voice, you will pretend you are deaf. If you ever try to take her again, I will make sure you and your entire family is extinguished from the mere breath of life. The warriors around me retracted their swords and flew up one by one back into the wormhole into the sky. Boa turned to me, and he tied a string around my wrist, whispering words that soothed my soul. My bride, my better half, my woman, here you stand in a naked world not for you to roam. Take my hand, forever bound to me by body, spirit, and heart. I take you home.
Maybe I'm a bird, following the seasons. This is what I've learned. I'm different for a reason. Kept the engine on, never stayed too long. I'm alright, I don't mind being restless. Something in your eye made me stay all night. I can see you are different too. Love me like a stranger, like a melody.
I jerked awake, and I found Boa looking at me with gentle eyes, his face filled with a deep concoction of love for me. I sobbed, and threw my hands around his neck, pulling him close to me, the fear of what I'd encountered replaying through my mind. I couldn't remember what had happened leading up to him saving me. I felt as if I had been traveling through time and space and had no energy. What happened to me? I asked. You didn't wake up after we came home from Mom. No matter what I did, you kept shivering and shaking, but you wouldn't wake up. And then I remembered her name. I pulled back and whispered, Boa Chani Veng. A smile broke across his face. You met him, didn't you? A tear fell from my eye. I met the other side of you. I'm amazed at how strong you are. Those warriors, who were they? My spiritual army sent to protect you? And then he pulled me into his arms. I was so scared, Mai Thao. I have never been this afraid before. You didn't look it. He pulled away and cupped my face. Trust me, wife, I was near death. I can save 1,000 souls and bring them home, but when it came to you, I was fighting my own fear like hell. Trying to focus to bring you home was getting my own heart. Trying to focus to bring you home was gutting my own heart. If I had failed, you didn't, I cut in. I'm here. His eyes filled with tears. I love you. I do. I love you, Mai Thao. I love everything about you. From the way your nose crinkles to the way your eyes appear just a little puffy in the morning when you first wake up, to how your feet rub each other until you fell asleep. I love you. I watched as he kissed the top of my hands, and he lifted his head back to look up at me. I love you. Stay with me always. Never leave me. Never part from me. You are my woman. I felt the tears prick in my eyes as I sobbed. Boa, He put a finger across my lips. You don't have to say anything. I just want you to listen to me. No matter what happens from here on out, I will never let anything happen to you. You are mine to protect, to honor, to love, and to shield. I will never let fear govern your dreams again. Be with me, stand beside me, walk with me, sleep with me, and bear my children. I broke down and I cried as I reached out to hold him. I choose you, Boa Chani Veng. I choose you. Through all of it, I choose you. My mother came to visit me the following month, and she brought some herbs with her. I recognized those herbs as the ones she had always had me to deliver to my sister. She was worried about me just as much as she was about them. Boa was in the back chopping wood, and my in-laws were at the garden shed. You keep getting fat, Mai Thao. Don't get too comfortable, or else your husband might start wandering around for another woman, my mother scolded me. I couldn't help but laugh. It had been a long time since I'd heard her voice remind me of things like this. Being married meant losing that voice of your mother's you hear daily. I reached over and dropped the herbs back into her hands. Why are you being so rude? I brought those for you. I smiled. Mama, I don't need them. She made a face. If you're going to give me attitude, you can certainly pay for them if you like. I laughed even harder. Mama, aren't you even going to ask me why I'm getting fat? Then her eyes narrowed, and the color drained from her face. Her lips formed a big O, and I laughed. "Yes, Mama, I'm pregnant." The look she gave me was pure terror and shock, and also love and tenderness. She didn't know how to react, and she stood up only to sit back down again. "You're pregnant?" she asked. "Yes," I cried as I took her hand and laid it on my belly, which had begun to harden. Her eyes watered with tears, and she let out a sob as her hands came to hug me. "Oh, my darling daughter, how precious! How far along are you?" 8 weeks, give or take, I think. I wiped my mother's tears. "Don't cry. I'm doing all right. I'm quite lucky that I don't have morning sickness, which explains my weight gain so easily. I'm just eating everything." She wiped her eyes and laughed. "Oh, what a gem! I can't wait to tell your father." The pregnancy came as a shock to me, just as much. Shortly after the ritual was performed, I was beginning to feel as if my world was clogged with exhaustion. I felt drained, losing flavors and food from my mouth, and I felt as if sleep wasn't enough for me. My husband was concerned and was about to do another ritual when my mother-in-law noticed something. She'd given me thick cloth to put between my pants for when I had my cycle, and they were to be used only once. Each time I would let her know that I needed more, and I had stopped asking her for fabric. I was so tired that I hadn't noticed it until my mother-in-law brought it up. "Let me feel your belly," she said that night. I lay down on the bed and she lifted my shirt up, moving her hand on my stomach. My husband had stood beside me as my mother-in-law felt the lower portion of my abdomen, and then her eyes lit up with glee. "Baby! Baby! Oh, baby is right here!" She'd taken my husband's hand and led him to touch what was beginning to harden. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me, and I started to cry. My husband came to me and gathered me into his arms, crying and sobbing as he kissed my belly. "Hello, my sweetheart. Do you hear me? I'm your papa. You hear me? I'm your papa." My mother-in-law and I both laughed at how cute the moment was. "You take care of yourself now," my mother said as she packed up her things to leave. "Don't do anything heavy." "I promise, Mother, I will keep a watch over her like a hawk," Bua said. We bid my mother goodbye and watched her disappear down the road that led home. My husband came to wrap his arms around me and pulled me close to him, his lips nuzzling my neck. "What should we name her?" he asked. I turned toward him. "Her?" Smiling, he replied, "I guess my hopes are showing." "Well, I hope it's a boy." I don't mind either one. I want a girl as pretty as you and a boy as strong as me. But I want 14 of them." My eyes flew wide open. "I am not giving birth to 14 children." He made a sad puppy face. 10? I took his hand in mine. "Maybe." I went to bed that night with my husband's hand over my belly, protecting the little life growing inside me. As I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, I'd found myself in a garden of fruits and vegetables, plucking a string of grapes to eat. I was so hungry for them, and they were so full of sweet nectar that it ran down my chin. When I jerked awake, the rooster was crowing, and Bua was looking right at me with his gentle eyes. "Dreaming?" he asked. I nodded. "Of what?" "Of a garden of fruits and vegetables." A smile appeared on his face. "I told you, girl." The joy of watching my belly swell with life had been a blessing to witness. Each day when I woke up, Bua's hands were wrapped around me like a vine, protecting, securing, and seeking love. The connection between our heart and soul had brought me to a deep understanding of how he had felt for me since the beginning of time. My heart began pounding toward him in a different tune, a tune I never knew existed before. It was the tune of love, of eternity, of forever, that instilled into me an emotion of being protected and embraced. I never wanted it to go away, and even breathing without him now was hard to do. It was intoxicating and yet at the same time so freeing. Was this what true love was all about? How was it that it developed in such a short time, and when I looked back, I was so rude at the day of my wedding, and I wanted to pinch my own flesh to burn for what I did to him. Bua was right. I would have a lifetime of making it up to him. The dreams came no more, and I slept peacefully when the sun disappeared in the horizon, waking up fully rested. My waist had outgrown all my clothes, and my mother-in-law and I spent our days sewing new ones for me. We had become close, speaking without holding back, both our bold tongues sharing thoughts and sometimes even arguing like two enemies, only to hold hands again like sisters. My husband was in disbelief at how odd our relationship was, but I knew that a part of him was intrigued slightly. The weekends were spent with him doing spiritual rituals away from home, and I still went with him, carrying the bag of gong and horns, walking beside him as we entered the home. I set up the altar, burning the candles and incense, and I watched him slip the red veil over his head and sat on the bench. The trance that shook his body with such force that sometimes the ground seemed to dance with him. He sung ancient verses that made my body sway with the need to continue listening, and with each string he tied around the wrists of people, the pain disappeared and a smile replaced it. I was proud of him and his work. He wasn't afraid of anything, and I was truly content. The day that changed everything started as normal as possible. My mother had sent word that she was going to do a blessing for my newly arrived nephew. She wanted our presence for the welcoming ceremony. Boa's uncle asked him to go fix the garden shed roofing that day, and I mentioned that I would go ahead, and Boa could follow after he was done. He refused to let me go alone, but I was determined to go. If only I had listened. I arrived at my mother's house, where my Nyaku was laying on the bed of bamboo leaves. I heard about her delivery of my nephew for a few days ago, and that she'd lost a lot of blood, resulting in my brother having to bring her to the hospital. She looked pale, but still gave me a smile as I came to sit beside her and picked up my nephew to hold. A cute button nose, soft skin, and a head of black hair stared at me as I kissed his cheeks. "How are you feeling?" I asked. She gave me a faint smile. "I'm still sore, and I'm still bleeding heavily." "Has my brother changed the leaves yet?" Shaking her head, she replied, "No, he's been busy helping Mom prepare for the blessing." I turned around and shouted for my brother, Ning, and he appeared, a strapping young and handsome man with broad shoulders and short hair. "Sister, you're here! Where's that brother-in-law of mine?" he asked. "He'll be by later. He's helping an uncle fix the roofing on his home. Your son looks just like you." "Thank you. How are you doing? How is pregnancy treating you?" Smiling, I replied, "Very well. Here, come change Nya's paddings on the leaves. She's bleeding heavily and it might have soaked through." "Okay, all right." I moved over, and I watched as my brother brought the new leaves to lay on the ground before picking up his wife to set her down. As he removed the old ones, I saw that bright crimson liquid had gathered on the bamboo leaves, staining them. He replaced everything, and then lifted her back on the new bedding. "I'll give you a bath later and bring you fresh clothes," he whispered. "Thank you," she said. "Stay with your Nya. Other sisters will be here soon, and they can help Mom prepare since their bodies are not heavy with the baby." I nodded and moved back to sit close to my Nya. She was exhausted, and I reached over to touch her cheek. "You look so pale. Are you all right? Do you need anything?" I asked. Shaking her head, she replied, "No, I'm just tired. Can you hold baby while I sleep?" "Go on, sleep. I'm here. I'll take care of him." I unwrapped my little nephew and watched as his body stretched, and when his little mouth formed an O and yawning, I couldn't help but laugh. He was such a joy to see, and I couldn't wait to hold mine. He was wet, and just as I finished changing him, my 3 older sisters entered the house. "Oh my," Faku said as she came to touch his little cheek. "He's adorable." "Isn't he?" I asked as she took him from my arms. "He's such a little stinker." I stood and stretched as I'd been sitting, and that was when Mai Thao noticed the swell in my belly. She reached out suddenly and touched it, her hand going down the front and around it. "What I'd give to have this," she whispered as tears filled her eyes. "You're so lucky. Out of all of us, only you can make Mom a grandma. The 3 of us, we're just old spinsters with no hope." "Don't say that," I said as I took her hand. "Your time will come." "When? When Death calls me?" Pua asked. "I'm tired of waiting, and so is my husband. Today he didn't even want to come with me. Anything having to do with celebrations of a new baby, he avoids it. It reminds him what we lack in our life." As we were speaking, my brother-in-law Mua entered, and his eyes fell on my belly. A smirk appeared on his face as he walked in, and I knew trouble had arrived. Wow, Sister Mai Thao, you work fast and work well. I guess out of all the sisters here, you should have been the one I married. Looks like you're the only one deserving to be a wife since you can carry the seed of a man. Look at your sisters, all three of them. Worthless little snitches who can't do anything but gossip and spit the seed of her husband out. A dry, meaningless woman with no purpose at all. Mai Thao lowered her face to the ground, and I saw fresh tears forming in her eyes. I reached out and touched her arm and then looked over at her husband. Be kind. You are her husband, and should know better than to embarrass her, I said. He laughed and came forward to shove Mai Thao away from me. I'll embarrass her all I want. I pulled out to hold onto Mai Thao's hand, and the next instant was like a blur. He shoved my sister against the wall, but because I had clung onto her hand, I went with her. All I saw was the beanpole holding my parents' home coming straight at me. I remember slamming into it, and the pain from my belly sent me into a darkened state. Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 4 will be released shortly.
Nothing ever felt as good or as easy as when we were young. Oh. Though I felt misunderstood, it was a pleasure running away with you. We were just children acting like a doll, crazy, naive, bold and carefree. We were kids having kids, crazy, naive. It amazes me that we didn't fall apart harder than we did. Now they keep us on speaking terms. We grow and we learn. I have no regrets, only forgets. Oh, a big thank you to life for giving us end. Oh, when the timing's right, there's no wasteland. Oh, we were just children acting like adults, crazy, naive, bold and carefree. We were kids having kids, crazy, naive. It amazes me that we didn't fall